So it's Easter, which means only one thing. It's all-weather Christmas, all-weather finals day at Lingfield Parks in its 5th year now, and it should be a really good day. And we're here to preview the 6 races taking place on ITV4.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah, I think there's 6 from Lingfield and 3 from Newcastle. All obviously all weather on Friday, so it should be a good day. Lots of competitive racing, and I think it's just something that's going from strength to strength, really, isn't it? The day at Lingfield, it's it's proper horses. It's, as you mentioned, it's 5 years old now, nearly, and I think every year has been better and better. To be honest, the quality of horses we're seeing good turf horses who have been campaigned with these races on this Friday in mind.
It sort of half answers to what I was going to ask you, really. Do you take a keen interest in all-weather over the winter? Are you more traditional?
I do follow the jumps mainly. I watch bits of obviously the big races, the listed races, and some of the qualifiers for this, because I do like having a punt or whatever on all-weather finals day, because I think that, as we were just talking about before we started this, these horses run against each other a lot. So by watching just 3 or 4 different races, you can often get a really good idea of what you think might win. Anyway, you don't have to do hours and hours of form searching for a lot of the races, which is nice, and obviously makes it quite a good punting medium, I think.
Great, so we'll skip the apprentice handicap, which looks very messy and isn't on ITV4, and we'll jump into the marathon. And there's some interesting types in here, and the market at the moment is headed by Watersmeet, who's had a really good winter.
Yeah, he was second in this race last year, and he's 3 from 3 this winter, isn't he? And he's beaten a few of these already. He beat Curb Your Enthusiasm. He also beat Funny Kid as well, who... That's the French raider in here. I think he could possibly be the bet for me. He's a point bigger. He's about 4 to 1, whereas Watersmeet is sort of 3 at best. I think maybe even 11 to 4 mostly. But I watched that run back at Wolverhampton last time. It was a couple of months ago now. But basically, Watersmeet has massively got first run on Funny Kid. Funny Kid was having only his 2nd start, I think, at 2 miles that time. He's completely unexposed at the trip, and he actually got there travelling best. And Watersmeet, who's very game and likeable, has seen him off essentially in the finish. But I wouldn't be surprised if Funny Kid sort of was off the back of a break. He might not have been absolutely primed for that. It might have been a case of qualifying him for this race, and I think he might have a bit more to offer. And if they get him a bit more prominent this time, and if Watersmeet doesn't get first run to the same extent, he might be able to go past him and stay past him, because I think he did head him, and he was just out-battled in the finish. But so I thought a point difference, I thought Funny Kid would be the one that I'd be siding with. There's also a chance that obviously 2 Johnson runners in there, but probably both going to be the front runners, Soldier in Action as well, and being the other potential pace. It wouldn't be the sort of strangest thing for those 2 to actually both go forward and make it a test, rather than it being tactical. You do see it quite often, the Johnson runners often both go forward. I'm not saying they're going to set it up for something coming right at the back, but I think Funny Kid could be just in behind them. He's got a good draw in 4, so I thought at 4 to 1, I thought he was fairly interesting for the marathon.
Okay, Funny Kid there, and we'll jump into the fillies and mares, and we've already mentioned a pattern of horses bumping into each other, and there's plenty in here that will be familiar with each other. Yeah,
there's so many sort of form lines and collateral bits of form and all the rest of it for this race. This is really tricky, I thought. Obviously, Diagnostic represents an excellent yard and hasn't been seen to best effect in either of her starts in 2018, so you can completely see why she was sort of favourite really for this race. I think she was 2-3 over 7 furlongs on her penultimate start, and then sort of basically was disadvantaged by a steadily run sprint at Kempton last time. So the return to 7, hopefully a big field and probably a strong pace will see her to better effect. But in such an open race, I might have a bet on something else at a bigger price. There's one, Make Music, Andrew Balding's runner. I mean, I was surprised to see her at 20s, to be honest. I'm not saying she's going to win, but she's steadily progressive. Her best form is at this trip. She's been running over 6 and 7, but I think she's definitely better at 7. If you look back to her turf form at the back end, well, it was only in May. Say in the back end, it was sort of the middle of the season really. But the last significant piece of turf form that she put up was a second at Goodwood to Gossiping, which is really solid form in a deep handicap. The other thing to like about her is that she's got a fairly good draw in 6. She's really speedy, and she's probably going to be one that's going to maybe get the rail, get out, ping the gates, and get the best position in the race. So I thought 20-1 was definitely too big, but it is really open. You've got the likes of Zest, who's won 2 here this winter, beat Summer Icon last time, who then went on and franked the form by finishing second in a listed race next time out. Soul Silver's steadily improving, seems to have a good turn of foot, should be suited by this sort of test, you'd think. But I'll go for Make Music at a big price, just maybe each way to sort of lead and maybe hang on for a place. Diagnostics obviously interesting as well, but a really open race, that one.
Yeah, Make Music to hit the right note though.
Hopefully, yeah.
Into the sprint. And there's one name that stands out in here, in Capchi, who was at one point really frustrating, but in his last 2 runs he's taken to the all-weather really well.
Yeah, he has, and he's really quick and pacey, and look, I can completely see why he's up there around the top of the market. He was wide last time, and he still got into a good position and still managed to win quite impressively. Obviously, there will be, you'd imagine, plenty of pace on in this, because you've also got Gifted Master, who's an out-and-out front runner. I'm expecting him to definitely be the one of the 3 pacier horses to be up there. The other one being Gracious John, who is another speed merchant, really. So it doesn't always happen, especially at Lingfield, when you've got a lot of pace. It can still hold up, and it's one of those tracks where I think because it's so sharp and you need to be so prominently positioned, it's harder to get a pace burn up there than it is at some other tracks. But at the same time, I think Atletico should be really suited by the way the race is going to be run, hopefully. Now he probably hasn't won the races that he should have done. Certainly recently, he's been second on his last 4 starts, and he ran really well, shaped like the best horse at Lingfield last time here, over 5 furlongs, obviously back up to 6. He's effective at both trips. I don't think he's had the best of rides. I'm not saying that last ride there was anything wrong with that. It was a fairly tactical race, and he came round the bend last, got pulled wide, and then had loads of ground to make up. But certainly before that, I don't think he was possibly getting the best of rides, and I think Adam Kirby's a massive positive on him around Lingfield. I don't think there's many better jockeys on the all-weather anywhere really, and especially in likes of Lingfield and Wolverhampton than Kirby. So I think that's a big positive. Hopefully the race will be run to suit, and hopefully Kirby will have him in a better position than he has been recently when they turn in, because we know he's going to be finishing strongly. It's just whether he's got too much to do when he starts to motor.
I must admit, I'm surprised to see him as big as 14-1 here. Do you think he's running out of chances?
Well, some people will be put off by the number of times he's finished in second, and obviously you have to take that into account. But he's not quirky or anything. He just needs things to drop right. And I'd be definitely willing to give him a chance at those sort of prices. 14 is far too big. Even if you back him each way, you'd really hope that he was in the frame, in the front 3. Sorry, I think he's a really, really solid each way bet at 14s, and I'll probably be backing him to win as well, because I think he could easily win this.
Great, so we'll go into the 3-year-old final now, and top of the market is Corinthian United. Could be a bit of a hot pot here. Yeah,
I mean, we've gone through some pretty open races, the first couple at least, but this race is, I think, probably going to be hard to beat. To find one against Corinthian Knight that makes a lot of appeal, to be honest. I think he's 6 from 8 on the all-weather overall, so he's just an absolute monster on the artificial surfaces. He was beaten only a length and a half in the Group 3 Serenia Stakes at Kempton, back end of last season. and he travelled all over everything there. And I think that probably that a sharper 6 here is absolutely ideal. He's since improved on that form, won at Chelmsford, and he went over to Shanty last time and won a listed race there, where things didn't go his way at all. He was switched and didn't get the clearest of runs, and he still managed to win by over a length. So I think he's really solid. He's got nothing wrong with the draw. You look down the list, there's a couple of horses that might well improve. I suppose Never Back Down being one, and Breathless Times as well, who's won his last 2, but I would say that they possibly weren't the deepest races. He is open to improvement. He's only had 3 starts and he's trained by Roger Charlton, so you definitely wouldn't write him off, but I think he'd have to improve significantly to beat Corinthian Knight. So I think the favourite should be really hard to beat here.
Okay, and into the Mile Championship now, and another favourite here in Second Thought, who won the Lady Wolfrina at Wolves on ITV a couple of weeks ago. Got a great ride from Ryan Moore that day. It's James Doyle on board this time. Has he still got leading claims?
Oh, definitely. I mean, looking at this race, it's a case of Second Thought. Essentially, he could have been a very good turf horse if they'd have kept him on the go on the turf. He finished second in the Sandy Lane to Harry Angel, don't forget, back in May, and it was a track record time, and he caught the eye finishing second. He was then obviously didn't have everything go his way in terms of training for the rest of that season. I think he was off for a fair amount of time after that good second, but they brought him back, and he's 6 from 6, got a perfect record on the all-weather. I think he's just essentially just a class above the rest of this field. Obviously there's always the chance of difficulties, but he did overcome a bit of trouble in running last time, didn't he? He was slowly away, he didn't help himself, and obviously that could be a potential. That's for me, that's probably the only thing that's going to get him beat. If he misses a break again, gets trapped, which is definitely possible at Lingfield, gets trapped in behind some runners and then just can't get a run, that is definitely a potential scenario. But at the same time, I think he's easily the best horse in this race. You look at Arcanada, who is I think he's a general second favourite behind Second Thought. He's likeable, but he's not in the same league, I don't think, as Second Thought, to be honest. He won last time, obviously beat Mr. Owen, who then franked the form in the Winter Derby, which is obviously a key race when looking at this day. But at the same time, I just think basically Second Thought, there's no need to really go much further than looking at him.
About poor old Spare Parts. He's been the story of the winter, really, and because of a technicality, he's going to have to take his chance in this race.
He's very unlucky, really. The connections are pretty annoyed, aren't they? And you can see why. It was a sort of administrative error, wasn't it? A cut that meant that he couldn't run in a much more winnable race. But yeah, he's definitely one of the. He sort of deserves to win that prize for winning the most races, doesn't he? In a way, just because how often he's run, and he's been the main horse that everyone's talked about, really, in terms of winning the most races. I know there's another horse obviously that's on the same amount of wins as him, but if you were to ask me what the other horse was, I looked it up earlier, I think, but I wouldn't be able to tell you. But Spare Parts is the one that everyone's talking about. So yeah, unfortunate, but we'll have a run round. He won't be good enough in this race, but maybe he'll pick up some prize money.
One for the pub quiz. Captain Lars, it is.
Captain Lars,
he runs at Newcastle, I think, as well. So he might pinch the prize. He
might be the one that goes one better.
Yeah, they count down to 4th, so he might just sneak a 4th at Newcastle and take it. And once ago, the middle distance, the Easter Classic. I'm not sure the actual name of this race. There's so many, and the Winter Derby is really key here because we've got the 1, 2, 3 in the actual Winter Derby, and we've also got the 1, 2, 3 in the trial as well. Yeah,
might as well start with the Winter Derby itself. Obviously, that was won by Mr. Owen originally. He was first past the post, but he was then demoted, and Master of the World was promoted. I think that was definitely the right decision. Master of the World was carried across the track and definitely significantly inconvenienced. I suppose the thing with Master of the World is he's clearly the best horse at the weights that day. and he might well be again here, but he isn't the most consistent. He's got a bit of an in and out profile. At 7-2, I think there's probably more interesting horses in here. Obviously, Battle of Marathon was another one that was in behind that day. Mr. Owen, again, he could have a little bit more to offer. He's not had loads of starts for this yard, and he clearly is capable of going close in a race like this, having finished second or first past the post last time. I suppose the trial for the race would, for me, possibly have produced the most interesting trial for the Derby might have produced the most interesting contender for this race. I think Victory Bond might well be the one I'll back. He was beaten in that race into second by Utmost, but he was drawn wide and basically got a wretched trip and wasn't seen to best effect. He's another one that he's a quite a classy horse that wasn't beaten far in the York Stakes back in July. I think he was fourth, dead heated for fourth in that race. So he's classier than a lot of these. Interesting as well, I don't know whether there was a problem or something, but he skipped the Winter Derby itself to run in France, and there was I think 1 or 2 races that he was going to run in, but he missed both of those. I guess to run here, I don't know whether that's because he had a setback or something, which would obviously be a bit of a negative. But if they decided to just save him for this instead, then I guess that is a positive. So I'm not 100% sure what's happened there, but just looking at the form, I think he's one of the most interesting. He's got a better draw than he has had recently. He's in stall 4, so hopefully he can go one better than he did in the Winter Derby trial last time. The other one that might be of interest at a big price, double figure price, is Star Archer, who beat Mount Tahan in a minor event at Wolverhampton. A handicap at Wolverhampton, and that one's since bolted up and franked the form. He wasn't seen to good effect last time, Star Archer. It was a really steadily run race at Kempton where he basically just was really unsuited by it. He needs them to go a bit harder because he's quite a strong traveller. If they do go more of a gallop here, I think he could definitely place, and he's 10-1. But in terms of winning the race, I think Victory Bond's the most likely winner for me.
You've touched on Utmost, who 2 starts ago went from the front and they couldn't catch him.
Yeah.
Wasn't able to dominate next time. Is the race sort of set up from a pace perspective? That
Yeah,
he might have more of a chance?
He might be seen to better effect, I guess, this time. There's probably less pace on here than before, but he is drawn in 7, so if something does get up his inside and adopt a prominent position, then that might be an issue. I think it's more that his biggest rating comes from a race where he was seen to really good effect and where Victory Bond wasn't seen to good effect. There is a chance that he could get at the run of the race again, but I think as long as Victory Bond gets a smoother run through, I think he'll still beat him. I think he was probably should have been the winner that day. But it's a good point you make. Some people might like the fact that he might get more of an uncontested lead here, which will help him, of course, and he might get a lot closer than he did in the Winter Derby, and he might reverse form with a couple of those from the Winter Derby. But I think Victory Bond overall for the win.
Okay, might know the answer to this already, but what would your nap of the day be?
I'd say I think Corinthian Knight probably the most likely winner, and the most solid bet of the day probably. So I'd say that'd be the nap. I'd say in terms of the best bet, just in terms of prices, I think Atletico has to be one of those. I think each way at 14s, I think that's a really, really good bet. So those would be my 2 best bets on the day, I think.
Great stuff, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.